welcome to a special panel series titled KPMG Josh, Driven to Deliver the Best. This panel discussion promises to be very exciting as it's futuristic and very, very compelling. We're going to be discussing the average digital user in 2030. A few key findings that I'd like to bring to the fore before we deep dive into this conversation. This conversation is really on the basis of the KPMG report that has just been released. It's titled Digital India in 2030. India is expected to have about 1 billion people connected by 2030, and hence there will not be, homogeneity in the profile and preferences of digital users. Having said that, one is hoping that with rising disposable income, greater affordability, the fact that we will have high-speed internet without any interruption, all of this will actually lead to a significant progression in the sophistication of digital users. Having said that, given the large diversity we envisage, what will this mean for digital businesses at large? How will they have to remodel themselves? What consumption patterns are likely to be dominant in India? And who and what will drive monetization, which is, of course, the most pressing question. Having said that, the KPMG has done a lot of research, really deep dive, and got some findings here. They say the new digital consumer in India is expected to be non-English speaking, a mobile phone user, of course, from a developed rural area or a non-metro urban setting, and who is increasingly willing to pay for content online. So this is essentially the mass, Indian digital consumer of 2030. So let's start with Neeraj. Are you in agreement with the profile that has been put out for 2030?
Given the last 2 or 3 years, the manner in which there has been about a 12x growth in overall consumption, the fact is that the consumer is moving from, sort of India into more Bharat and middle Bharat, and there is no two ways about that. I would agree with most of the assumptions, whether it's going from that 550 to about 820 to 1 billion plus by 2030. The only thing that I would probably add a word of caution on is the reference to increasingly being inclined to paying as well. I think that one is still a little bit of a slow starter, but we'll talk about it a little later.
Tarun?
No, I think, the way we've seen telecom data prices come down over the last 36 months, and what we've seen in proliferation of handsets, a sub-$100 handset, and even a Geo feature phone that can support video and data and so on and so forth. I think this number may happen earlier than what we're saying. And why I'm saying this is because, assume Geo says that there are about 350 million subscribers of 4G, because they are the only 4G platform in the country. And the other two put together have roughly about 600 to 700 million users, and there will be a repeat, double SIM kind of profile there. But in all, I don't think telcos will continue to support 2G data for too long. I think 2G data is about 18 to 24 months away in this country, and as the advent of 5G happens, no telecom player will be able to support technology that has 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. So people will have to migrate, and this migration will happen possibly a little bit faster than what we're all thinking. And with that, I think the top usage of all of that will be digital video streaming, right, and audio streaming. So whether it will be in the subscription VOD model or in the ad-supported model remains to be seen. But there will be enough of a volume in both, and India will possibly progress to watching digital video even faster than it currently is doing.
Just to build on what Tarun has said, I think every 100 million got added to a sort of internet base is very different from the beginning. And I think the next 100 million also going to be very, very different. So especially urban is reaching almost like 2 out of every 3 Indian getting connected. The headroom to grow is more in the rural area, which is still sitting at a 20-25% kind of penetration. So it will be very, very different profile. So there's a huge amount of sort of change which has already happened there, and it's going to continue in that direction. And I think the sort of approach to or attitude to payment is also changing in general. So it will be more open to pay or more open to transact in online, and especially some of the content areas. It may be micro transaction or a pure play transaction. That's something we need to see.
Sure. Girish, let me come to you and ask you that given this situation in 2030, do you think traditional businesses like print, radio, TV need to start thinking now about remodeling their businesses so that they can keep pace with what will happen in, as we progress very rapidly into the future? And do you think they'll still be relevant in that era?
There are two aspects to this. Yes, traditional businesses need to change. And when it comes to traditional businesses, I think in general, when it comes to media businesses, I think they will need to move beyond their existing approaches to distributing or accessing the consumer. I think more and more it's going to become that there's a consumer, he has a certain amount of, there's a certain type of need. As an organization, I need to meet that need, right? Now, whether I choose to do it completely digitally, whether I choose to do it as a combination of digital plus traditional, those individual businesses will have to evolve. But yes, pure play digital traditional models in the current avatar are unlikely to survive. So they will definitely need to go through that change. But the step forward that I would also put out is, just because you have gone digital or you are digital doesn't mean that that's it. I think the way the environment is evolving and way the consumer itself is evolving, way technology is evolving, way payment mechanisms are evolving, right? Existing digital businesses will also have to evolve over time, and not necessarily be inflexible in how they approach the consumer or what their strategy is going to be.
Sure. As a very early entrant in the digital world, Neeraj, and a pioneer of sorts, what would you bet on? Which sectors within this space would it be most beneficial for?
So 3 areas. I think the first will be any form of content creation. Because what's going to happen is, we've talked largely phone, even in the report or whatever. What I'd like to, sort of for the benefit of the audience here and your viewers, see, your crystal ball gazing 2025 and 2030. 2025, you will have 5G. 2030, even I can't look at where it will be. But with broad IoT, you will have one new constituent as large as potentially the phone coming into it, which will be autonomous cars, where the entertainment experience is going to be very significant, and that's going to be adding 3 hours of potential consumption. Whether it's entertainment, whether it's communication, the cars itself, when you're in an autonomous vehicle, you don't need to be all together. You could be sort of, it's like a workplace in its own form. And there's 3 hours easily getting added in that scenario. So content creation is going to be one of the biggest, because I believe consumption of the average across print, television, radio, whatever, which may be standing at about 4.5 hours or so, could potentially go to between 10 to 12 hours, because this table that we are on will be connected. When you walk into the elevator, you walk around, video will literally become like air in that kind of an always-on connected environment. From there, you look at platforms. Today, we've been largely looking at telecom and device. I believe retail spaces, homes, are going to be the next generation of platforms. And I think the third element in this is, we keep looking at revenue that will get generated out of this, and we tend to only look at transaction, which is subscription and advertising. I believe the biggest play is going to be on the player. The player is the new real estate, because it will lead to commerce, it will lead to transaction. The moment you start looking at business in that manner, you are technically then addressing from today's $75 trillion sort of global economy to potentially, a 200 trillion economy. There is AI, there is virtual reality, and it's all leading to commerce. It's all leading to real transaction. So this is very transformative, that we are talking about. So summarizing, massive consumption, increase in consumption, newer platforms, and don't look at media only from advertising and transaction, but look at it as part of an integral part of commerce all the way.
The one thing that digital's already done over the last few years, and specifically over the last 18 months, is taken advertising to transaction and performance, right? About 70% of digital advertising is all around performance today. There's very little on classic branding. Everybody wants it to lead to something. They don't want it to lead to just advertising or just brand lift and all of that, right? So you have a KPI that is attached to everything. And what Neeraj is really saying is that this is going to become even more as you go along, right? Digital is possibly the only platform today that does not give you advertising for advertising's sake, but advertising for business metrics' sake. And that is the big difference between traditional media and digital media. And when you talk about print and radio, this is where the difference happens, right? Is that your ability to be able to drive people's KPIs, your ability to be able to drive them at user level, your ability to be able to transform user behavior, and to be able to do this at various levels of the funnel makes you very different from traditional media.
Tushar, if you look at digital businesses today, I mean, it's not breaking news when I say they're all struggling because monetization is still an issue. So what will be the critical factors really in defining a profitable digital business going forward?
I think basically a multiple stream of revenue is going to be very, very critical, and especially this is true in Indian context. So pure play advertising-led model is always going to be challenged. And that's where Tarun's point, basically linking it to transaction, building a more solutioning approach, and then creating a connected consumer journey is going to be way forward, where you can unlock a larger base and not keep it limited to maybe 10,000, 20,000 advertisers, right? So you need to unlock maybe say a few lakhs of advertiser or a micro enterprising coming on platform and doing transaction and promoting is one of the critical aspect which.
Sure.
Let me give my 2 bits on the question that you raised last, right? On the economics and the profitability of digital businesses, right? I think there are 2-3 points to keep in mind when we even start discussing this question. I think the simple reality is India's digital consumer landscape is 2 years old, right? That's when the biggest chunk of users have come on board. Before that, consumption patterns, everything was very different, right? And you are talking about a market which is going to add another 500 odd million plus over the next 5 to 10 years, right? So this is a market which is in its, high growth stage when it comes to scale, but very, very early stage when it comes to maturity, right? In a situation like that, where most businesses are also transitioning from traditional to digital, right? The question is really saying is not about, at this point, building profitable digital businesses, but it is more about saying that can you get to a situation where at scale I have a fairly sizable user base who are very engaged with me as a business, and I have something to offer to them which is of value, right? So in that sense, this is a market share, customer acquisition phase in the digital businesses. And in any sector, businesses in this stage are always going to be losing money, right? So it's really, I think, so we also have to be fair and get this market to a certain level of maturity before we can genuinely start looking at bottom lines. So I think there is a certain scale you do need to get to, but you cannot get to that scale without investing either in content or in distribution or customer acquisition at this point.
And at which point do you think the customer will be ready to pay?
So I think for a customer to be ready to pay, 2-3 things need to start changing. I think purely on digital, you need to get to a situation where your value proposition is better than what is already available. You also need to get to a situation where the paying economy itself develops. I think if you look at fintech and other situations, online transactions and payments are still evolving, are still growing. And I don't think we've reached a situation where that is also sizable enough. So I think again, when those elements start playing out, that's when transaction economy and SWORDs will start becoming viable for organizations to look at. So my sense is we are about at least 2 to 3 years away before that starts becoming serious numbers for organizations.
The way I look at this is 4 to 5 years out, I believe anything between 4 to 500 million consumers will be in a position to earmark between 50 to 100 rupees per month as their payout towards their media entertainment needs. And that 50 to 100 rupees will not go to one service. It could go to a bouquet of 3 to 4 services. They could come in and out of those services month by month, quarter by quarter. If you do the math on that, at a 500 million base, that's potentially a 30,000 to 60,000 crore market of sorts. Now, coming to how will they pay? You have to understand that in the last 2 to 3 years, there is a massive bundling that's happening, which means that the customer is paying, but is potentially getting bundled in that core access of data. Because if a customer is paying 150 rupees, for which he's getting 30 gigs of data and a bouquet of content services, today it's getting presented in that manner. For a simple reason that we had a market move away from your monthly recharge into an all bouquet. At the same time, you will start having more and more transactions happening through digital, as it were. And lastly, given the intent of this government or any government that may be, more and more of the schemes are going to be driven by you go online, you receive online, and that's going to be another big catalyst for this adoption of sorts.
I'll tell you 2 things, right? One, if these businesses have to do well and do better than what they're currently doing, they will have to hyper-personalize at scale. I think there is a lot of content being made, and unless people make enough effort of creating good content discovery, this will not get connected to consumers. We've done this in many languages, and we've, over the last 18 months put in a lot of AI and so on and so forth. And I've learned that you make content discovery easy for people, you will see consumption, and once they get used to consuming you, they will move from an ad-supported model over a period of time, if they have the propensity to pay, to a subscription-supported model. More and more people make content discovery easy, make payments easier, and when you get to a threshold level, which is what Girish was saying, when you get a threshold level of original content available, where people can come home very easily every evening and consume original content from an SWOT platform, you will see people switching habits, or at least making this as a part of their daily habit. They may continue to watching television, or they may watch TV or TV content as VOD for convenience, but they will also start to pay for content.
Given the fact that we're going to see a proliferation of content, of users, and we're going to be this digitally connected world, what do you think, coming to the, to understand what will be the mass digital user, what kind of content will be dominant?
If you look at the 2030 kind of perspective, then it's going to be more of experiences which is going to matter, and it will go beyond. And there are sort of, if you look at the top of pyramid, which will start moving to more into sort of virtual reality and those kind of experiences, which will be much beyond sort of normal video kind of experience. So I would say basically world is going to move toward more of experiences. And if you look at connected experiences, as Neeraj was talking about, be it a retail experience, be it travel experience, or in-home experiences, will be a bit different.
Can you give me a summary of how you think, because of your intensive research, how companies who have invested very heavily in this sector need to mold themselves and re-engineer themselves for this very compelling future that we're envisaging?
So I think 2-3 aspects, right? I think first is, and this is something which sounds very intuitive, but very difficult to implement, is it's not traditional and digital. More and more it needs to be digital first, right? And again, more and more it needs to be about accessing the consumer whichever model it works. So I think the challenge which organizations tend to face is, because they've come from a very mature traditional ecosystem to make those shifts is really the number one challenge, right? So I think that's something is the biggest point I would take. It's not about trying to force fit digital into what you're already doing. It's about basically tearing everything apart and saying, let me relook at what the consumer wants and how do I get to that, right, in the most efficient way. I think that's that's the main thing that I would sort of put out there in terms of what organizations need to think about it.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you. Hope this was as exciting for you as for me as a moderator. Thank you very much.